Imagine a race. In lane 1, you have the fastest man alive wearing peak aerodynamic spandex and $200 track spikes, and millions of dollars of sports science poured into every single stride. In lane 2, you have a guy who hasn't bathed in like ever, wearing a dead animal, and running barefoot in a swamp. The swamp guys wins easily. It is incredibly easy to assume that because we have smartphones and modern medicine, we are the strongest version of our species to ever exist. But biologically, you are currently driving a minivan, and your ancient ancestors were driving tanks. The science behind this is genuinely unhinged. The reason we lost all that speed is even crazier. We are going to Australia, specifically the Willandra Lakes region, about 20,000 years ago. An Aboriginal man, who scientists very creatively named T8, was running through wet mud. We don't know why. Maybe he was hunting. Maybe something was hunting him. Either way, he had a lot going on. Scientists found his fossilized footprints and calculated his speed from the stride length. T8 was running at 23 miles per hour, barefoot in mud while actively accelerating. For context, Usain Bolt's top speed is 27.8 miles per hour on a bouncy rubber track, wearing carbon fiber spike shoes. With a full team of physiotherapists, biomechanists, and probably someone whose entire job is making sure his cereal is at the correct temperature every morning, T8 had none of that. T8 had a swamp and a reason to move fast. An Australian anthropologist named Peter McAllister did the math. He said, okay, what if we took T8, gave him modern training, gave him actual shoes, put him on a real track? What happens? He hits 45 kilometers per hour, 28 miles per hour. He beats Bolt. T8, a man whose entire pre-workout routine was probably just screaming, would have beaten the fastest human being in recorded history. Okay, so maybe they were fast, but surely we're stronger. We have gyms. We have protein powder in 30 flavors, including one that somehow tastes like birthday cake. We have people who deadlift cars on the internet purely for attention. Yeah, no. Let's talk about Neanderthals. Neanderthals have a terrible reputation. People hear the word and think slow, dumb, drooling in a cave. That is completely wrong. Neanderthals were apex predators, built like professional wrestlers, except they didn't need a performance contract or an entrance theme because they were already terrifying just by standing still. Skeletal analysis shows the average Neanderthal woman had about 10% more muscle mass than the average modern European man. Let that sit. Not a Neanderthal man. The average Neanderthal woman was more jacked than you are. She spent her days scraping thick animal hides, hauling enormous chunks of meat, and surviving conditions that would make most modern people cry into their lumbar support pillow. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger, peak physical condition, 7-time Mr. Olympia, literal Terminator. You put him in a room with a Neanderthal woman for an arm wrestling match, she wins. It is not even a contest. Because Neanderthals had shorter, lower arm bones than modern humans. In physics, a shorter lever generates significantly more mechanical force. Her arm was just a more efficient machine than Arnold's. She would slam his hand through the table and then look mildly confused about why a crowd of people is watching her do something that feels completely routine. So why were ancient humans built like this? Why were they so absurdly overpowered? It all comes down to the grocery store. Specifically, the fact that they did not have one. If we go way back in the human family tree, we were not always this athletic. Take Lucy, for example. Lucy is one of the most famous fossil specimens in history. She's an Australopithecus afarensis who lived about 3.2 million years ago. The University of Liverpool ran her skeleton through a full 3-dimensional computer simulation to reconstruct how she actually moved. Lucy ran like a toddler who just spotted a puddle. Top speed of about 11 miles per hour. No Achilles tendon spring. No endurance architecture. She was not built for running. She was built for climbing trees. And based on the biomechanics, not a whole lot else. So we started out slow. And then the environment said, okay, let's make this interesting. The forests shrank. The savannas opened up. And suddenly, our ancestors had to actually chase their food instead of just grabbing it off a branch. And this is where human evolution did something completely unhinged. We did not become faster than the other predators. A cheetah runs 65 miles per hour. A lion runs 50 miles per hour. If a lion decides it wants you dead, you are dead. Sprinting is not going to solve that problem for you. So instead, we became the only thing worse than a fast predator. We became a slow predator that never stops. We evolved sweating, which sounds like a terrible superpower. And it is, socially. But biologically, it is a masterpiece. Most animals pant to cool down. But panting forces you to sync your breathing with your running stride. which puts a hard cap on how long you can run before you overheat. Humans just leak water out of millions of tiny holes in our skin. It is deeply disgusting. It is also genius. This gave us persistence hunting. And I want you to really picture this. You find an antelope, you start jogging toward it. The antelope sees you and bolts at 40 miles per hour. You can't keep up. You know that. The antelope knows that. But you keep jogging. 30 minutes later, you find the antelope resting in the shade. It bolts again. You keep jogging. You do this for 5 hours. In the middle of the day, in the African savanna, when the sun is doing its absolute worst, the antelope cannot sweat. It cannot cool itself down. After 5 hours of this, it literally collapses from heat exhaustion. And you just walk up to it. To every other creature on Earth, ancient humans were the slasher villain from a horror movie. The thing that doesn't stop. The thing that doesn't need shade. The thing that just keeps coming. They were not the scariest thing in the ecosystem. They were the most patient. And patience, it turns out, is somehow more terrifying than speed. Homo erectus, specifically the Trichonoboi skeleton, had a massive barrel-shaped ribcage built to pull in enormous amounts of oxygen over long, punishing distances. Our feet have complex spring-loaded arches and tendons that are specifically engineered to absorb impact across dozens of miles per day. We were, in every biological sense, an endurance machine wearing human skin. And then, about 10,000 years ago, someone invented farming. And we threw all of that away. Someone looked at a field and thought, what if we just put seeds in the ground and waited? And everyone else thought, yeah, that does sound significantly less exhausting. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end for human physical potential. We stopped moving. And our bodies, which had spent hundreds of thousands of years fine-tuning themselves for extreme physical output, immediately started to unlearn a lot of that. The shift from a varied, protein-heavy hunter-gatherer diet to one based almost entirely on wheat and grain caused a measurable crash in human health. We literally got shorter. Archaeologists can see it directly in the skeletons. Populations that shifted to farming physically shrank compared to the hunter-gatherers who came before them. Our bones got weaker too. A hunter-gatherer's bones were dense and thick from constant stress loading, sprinting, jumping, climbing, hauling. Farming replaced all of that with slow, repetitive grinding labor in one spot. Within a few thousand years, human bones became noticeably lighter, more brittle, and more likely to snap. And here is the really annoying part. Farming wasn't even easier. It was harder in a lot of ways. We didn't trade athleticism for leisure. We traded explosive, full-body movement for chronic lower back pain and the exciting variety of doing the same motion every day until you die. We essentially paid for the existence of civilization with our own physical potential, and the decline just kept going. In the early 1900s, anthropologists in Rwanda documented Tutsi men casually jumping over 2.5 meters high during coming-of-age initiation ceremonies. The current high jump world record is 2.45 meters. These men were clearing world record heights just to prove they were adults. No coaching, no specialized equipment, just the social pressure of not embarrassing yourself in front of your entire community, which, honestly, might be the most effective sports psychology program ever devised. They weren't special. They just lived in a world that required it. Today, you do not have to jump over anything. You do not have to chase an antelope. Your food arrives at the door in a bag held by a stranger on a bicycle. Your home temperature is managed by a small box on the wall. We are, biologically, a species of retired elite athletes who decided to spend the rest of their lives on the couch. Everything your body was engineered to do, sprint, endure, hunt, suffer productively, it is all still in there. The hardware is completely intact. The software is just fully dedicated to answering emails. So would T8 beat Usain Bolt in a race? Probably yeah, if we are being honest about the conditions. Bolt runs because he is the greatest sprinter who has ever lived and the entire world knows it. T8 ran because if he stopped, he did not eat. Or he got eaten. Possibly both. It was a busy time. No training program in the world can replicate that kind of motivation.